I want to make sure you can hear me. Hello? Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Yes, no? Ah, there we go. I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Welcome to the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for February 1st of 2024. It is 10:01 in the morning. Commissioner Johnston, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
In the United States of America.
Under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Oops. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you having trouble hearing us, Christian?
Well, it was cutting in and out a little bit. I'm just going to put myself on mute for the time being. Maybe that'll help.
Okay. Okay, item C is our calendar session. Is there anything to add to the calendar? We're gonna talk about calendar here pretty soon, but any events or anything?
Just one item for the calendar session is I'm hoping, if the board's okay, I'd like to schedule an executive session for next Thursday, maybe before formal session, if that works for everyone's calendar.
What time are you thinking? Like 9:30?
I'm thinking 9:30. I'm looking at 30 minutes and it's to discuss property.
So that would be the 8th. Just double check here. I don't have any conflicts,
I'm good.
commissioners? No. Okay, so we will put an executive session on for February 8th at 9:30. All right. Item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. And we have received a considerable amount of written comment. But we do have an individual in the audience who would like to come forward. Jerry Turgeson. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Dr. Jerry Turgeson. I'm here representing the Community Wellness Collective as a member of the board. I have a statement we'd like to read in. In an attempt to provide more context and transparency to the email provided by our board president to the commissioners, Starrett and Bershauer, during the inclement weather events a couple of weeks ago, we seek to continue to find collaborative solutions to serving Newburgh residents struggling with social determinants of health, specifically shelter, mental health, addiction, and employment opportunities. Publicly questioning or challenging another community-based organization only comes after exhausting attempts to privately move forward together in parallel to support our most vulnerable community members. We recognize the complexity and difficulty in providing direct support services and hope only for continued success for YCAP as an organization. The Community Wellness Collective was founded in 2018 after a string of youth death by suicides within the Newburgh community. We are a group of citizens that came together with no political agenda other to insist that we never lose another youth to suicide in our community. This has led to many difficult conversations with health agencies, community-based and faith-based organizations to identify areas of opportunity to close gaps in services and outreach to those struggling with mental health. In the fall of 2020, YCAP approached the Newburgh Emergency Shelter, a volunteer-based inclement weather shelter, with the proposal to move into the Harvest House location in Newburgh, revamped as a low-barrier shelter. Newburgh Emergency Shelter then approached our Community Wellness Collective board, asking to come under our 501c3 organization as a program. In January 2021, CWC launched Newburgh Emergency Shelter at Harvest House. By summer of 2020, we moved to operating 7 nights a week and have done so for 3 years. The most recent location at Northside Community Church, while Any Door Place was being renovated. In the last 3 years of operation, we have closed only 1 night. We have become a relied upon, consistent service, not only for Newburgh, but Yamhill County, as the only 7-night-a-week shelter in the county. We are thrilled that organizations like Encompass Yamhill Valley will expand in the future and YCAP ADP will open soon. Due to differences in vision of serving the houseless population, YCAP and CWC formally dissolved our partnership in July of 2023. This meant ending the subcontract with YCAP to provide funding for sheltering services in Newburgh. Since then, we have graciously been awarded operational funding from the HHS Behavioral Health Grant and the Board of Commissioners, which has allowed us to continue serving and sheltering through no later than January 30th, 2024. After that date, we will fully pass the baton of night-by-night sheltering back to YCAP, as they hold the funding from the federal, state, county, and city level to provide the service. There are very different perspectives between our boards on what led to the conclusion of the partnership, but CWC remains committed to working with YCAP in parallel to serve our community in need and sees the importance of YCAP as the lead agency within our county. YCAP currently holds all available government funding for houselessness, tied up in ADP as the navigation center model for Yamhill County. Over $2.2 million from OHCS and the cities of Newburgh and McMinnville alone, as well as winter sheltering dollars from the state. It seems more than reasonable for our board to raise the question of support during the inclement weather event to our elected officials, both the Newburgh city government and county government. We also reached out directly to YCAP, but did not receive any formal communication from the organization around support for the inclement weather event or their ability to open ADP or youth outreach to serve Newburgh community members during that period. At the very least, we believe it is reasonable for YCAP to communicate with our organization, which has informally taken the lead in sheltering for the county, that they lack the resources to support staffing for a known upcoming inclement weather event. This communication will help our partnership and ensure that we stand up resources to protect the most vulnerable. This not only seems reasonable, but aligns with the accountability expected of the officially designated lead agency by OHCS on homelessness and winter sheltering for our county to communicate with our organization, which has informally taken the lead on sheltering, certainly for Newburgh. But often the county, having them share that they currently lack the resources to fulfill their responsibility beyond the permanent supportive housing. Although moteling and turnkey are invaluable resources to our county, the gap in low barrier day and night shelter remains, with no formal communication on timeline or plan for transition for the Yamhill County residents currently served by the Community Wellness Collective. Right now, that's equaling over 40 unique, difficult to shelter lives nightly. The timeline for pulling funding from CWC and opening ADP Newburgh in its place has resulted in an 8-month delay to the original ADP opening. This timeline and lack of communication beyond a preliminary meeting mid-January, with no set date publicly communicated, has left a small community-based organization to figure out how to fund sheltering for over 40 unique individuals 7 nights a week. Leading up to the inclement weather, CWC received a brochure from Encompass Valley Yamhill and realized that there was no daytime sheltering locations available within Newburgh to support our residents. Within 24 hours, CWC developed a plan in partnership with the 2nd Street Drop-In Center, Northside Community Church, local restaurants, and community volunteers to open 24 hours a day through the Drop-In Center site for the daytime and Northside Community Church for nighttime. During the dates of January 12th through the 16th, the CWC operated and staffed 24 hours a day and ultimately served 102 individuals for daytime supports and warming center and 72 people overnight during that time period. Ages ranged from 7 years old to 86 years old. It is important to note that the Community Wellness Collective is not funded for inclement weather support, but we felt it was essential to serve our community in this capacity during the inclement weather period. We fully understand the complexity and difficulty that comes about with offering services that unfortunately often become politicized. That said, our board's position has been and will continue to be that when accepting government funding, you also bear accountability to questioning and authentic conversations with citizens around the accessibility and urgency of the services that you have been entrusted to provide. Since the removal of Commissioner Sterrett from the YCAP board, the number of social media direct messages, emails, and phone calls to our CWC team has been astounding. The concern spans far beyond political affiliation and centers around lack of communication, transparency of budget, and the ability to engage in genuine dialogue. Commissioner Sterrett simply had the courage to ask the board of which she served as to what their inclement weather strategy is, and requested that local elected officials have the opportunity to raise concerns with our local agencies bearing the weight of services on very limited funding. Instead of jumping into action to inquire how they can be more supportive and communicative, YCAP seems to be more concerned with the damage to their reputation by the simple question of, why did their services close during inclement weather? We remain concerned that this question is interpreted as adversarial and in bad faith. We remain thankful for Commissioner Sterrett's willingness to advocate for Newburgh. By questioning the sense of urgency, transparency of spending allocation, and communication to local leaders and services, YCAP remains intent to exclusively provide, even at the cost of her board seat. Our ask is that at a minimum, this inclement weather event deserves a debrief with all stakeholders at the table. Clarity on what funding from all government levels goes to support sheltering and winter sheltering by city. Similar approach to neighboring counties of the lead agency taking the lead in organizational, community-based, and faith-based organizations with limited funding and resources. And advocacy for oversight mechanisms for non-governmental organizations accepting large government funding for public input and conversation. True to our origin, we do not raise these concerns lightly, but with the goal to never lose another preventable death to a social determinant of health factor in Newburgh, while simultaneously uplifting growing community concerns to gap in services. We welcome any feedback to how we can improve as a community-based organization. Thank you so much for your time today, and it's wonderful to speak to you on behalf of our board.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much, Jerry.
Thank you, Doctor.
In addition to the letter from CWC, we also received public comment from Paige Barton that was requested to be read into the record. So I will go ahead and do that now. It says, good evening, Yamhill County Commissioners. I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to offer this public comment of thanks to Commissioner Mary Sterrett. I'm appalled by what YCAP has done to her. Commissioner Mary Sterrett and I have rarely agreed on anything. Whatever your opinion when it comes to housing, it's evident to anyone that Mary is a dedicated leader. Commissioner Sterrett has served on the YCAP board since she was elected. As part of Commissioner Sterrett's role as an elected official and to serve on the YCAP board as an elected official liaison, one would believe it would be normal to ask questions, communicate with, and advocate for local government partners during an emergency. For YCAP to completely overreact and vote to remove Commissioner Sterrett from their board of directors is a serious misstep, given all of the resources that Yamhill County has provided YCAP. It requires much more than an explanation. It requires new leadership. The community, Newburgh's leadership, and Yamhill County leadership are right to ask questions about YCAP's activities. Despite receiving millions in funding, there's very little to show for it. Homelessness is a crisis, and in extreme weather, it is especially cruel to tell the community to stay safe and warm. Director Ball, how is anyone supposed to stay safe and warm when YCAP is sitting on the lion's share of the funding Yamhill County has to shelter the homeless? Commissioner Sterrett acted appropriately as a YCAP board member to connect Newburgh city leadership in an attempt to get answers for Newburgh city leadership ahead of extreme weather. The recourse for this serious miscalculation is for Director Alexandra Ball to resign. Yes, YCAP is vital to the community, but when it believes it does not need to respond to the community it serves, there is clearly a crisis of leadership. YCAP is not beyond accountability, not beyond reproach, and must be accountable for the taxpayer dollars that pays the same leadership who seeks to create a narrative today. Thank you, Commissioner Sterrett, for your attention to the lack of shelter in Newburgh during the recent ice storms. I also applaud the Community Wellness Collective for showing up, without whom everyone unsheltered in Newburgh would have been in peril. Community Wellness Collective is a constant resource in Newburgh, one that I have volunteered for and experienced firsthand. CWC is frankly more deserving of funding. Commissioners, thank you so much for your time spent reading. Paige Barton of Salem, Oregon, and a Yamhill County volunteer. YCAP also submitted a letter for public testimony. It is 9 pages long. It was not requested that it be read into the record, so I won't do that. However, I want to make sure that commissioners have had a chance to read all of the public comment. This letter came in about an hour and a half before the meeting started, so has everyone had a chance to read it?
Yes.
So last week, we had a discussion because the catalyst for the discussion was that Commissioner Starrett was kicked off of the YCAP board, which started to raise a slew of questions as to why and what our partnership with YCAP looks like in the future. I have to say that after reading the YCAP letter, first of all, there was no response to my email to the board director of YCAP or from Director Ball as to why you were removed. I sent that out over a week ago and there was no response. This letter, I assume, is the response. But it is quite shocking to me, the tone of this letter, because we have had a decades-long partnership with YCAP. In fact, I think that former Commissioner Ted Lopazinski is probably rolling over in his grave to read or understand if the notion that the county is simply a side note to YCAP's mission. Former Commissioner Lopazinski was integral. He was a founder of YCAP. And since then, a county commissioner has served on that board for the past, 40 some years, 45 years, 46 years. It's just astounding to me, the tone of this letter. I think that Director Ball needs to brush up on her history of the organization that she works for, and the integral part that the county has played in the formation of YCAP and subsequent support of YCAP. The other part that I took issue with is not only is the question of why you were removed from the board not answered, but also the statement that YCAP is not under the direction of any municipality in Yamhill County and or required to acquiesce to the whims of elected officials. That is, that's inappropriate. And if YCAP loathes public transparency as much as they seem to from this letter, then they are in the wrong business. Then you shouldn't be accepting public money. This has created shockwaves in the community. There has been a ripple effect. I've heard it from some of my supporters who are donors to YCAP, which is why it's also puzzling that this letter references that Yamhill County is not a significant funder of YCAP, yet they list several instances dating back only 3.5 years, really, where we have given collectively or promised well over $1 million of taxpayer funds. And our supporters are donors to YCAP. We have promoted YCAP. We have been stewards of their mission, and our supporters are significant donors to YCAP, not just the food bank, but the other parts of their mission. And I'm starting to hear from those donors that they're very upset as to what has happened here and that they're calling into question their future support of YCAP. So I think this has become quite the issue for YCAP. And at the end of the day, for me, there is an expectation in the community that this organization would be ready for events such as the one that happened. And if they're not, that they need to answer the question, why weren't they? What also needs to be answered for is the removal of Commissioner Starrett from the board, which I believe was a critical mistake. And I think it needs to be fixed. And so far, I don't see any willingness to do so. Commissioners, any thoughts on the testimony that we've seen?
Well, I think the question still remains as to the requirement that YCAP per its bylaws have fill one part of the 1/3 of elected official seats with a county commissioner. The Director Ball's actual words were, while YCAP has maintained a county commissioner on our board, and I believe I brought the actual wording of the bylaws that I had a copy of from 2008 that said, and one of those would be a county commissioner. So I think we're still left with that unanswered question. Now what? And I don't know what the answer is or what the process would be for something like that. But I think it's important for there to be representation. As you referenced, Chair, there's significant funding and community collaboration that's always been part of our community outreach. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. And I would imagine that it's their move.
Yeah, and I want to correct, it's been 43 years. 43 years of partnership with a county commissioner as part of the founding body of this organization. And the tone of this letter is that the county is an insignificant part of what we do. I think that's unacceptable, and I will continue to follow up as to what their plan is going forward, because honestly, if this is the reaction, then I'm going to struggle to vote for any type of funding relationship going forward for YCAP. Commissioner, any thoughts?
From my comments last week, I don't think anything's changed. I still feel like that there's missing pieces from the YCAP portion of this. And I don't think this letter addresses the main issue of why Mary was removed
Right.
from the board. So until I start getting more information from that, which seems to be, we got this letter instead of an explanation for that. So I'm not sure when that's coming or if we need to reach out to them individually and ask. Chair Bershauer already sent an email requesting that and hasn't received any. So I'm not sure how to proceed from here, but that's, I guess, where I'm at. I'm still in a holding pattern waiting for more information from YCAP on why we're at where we're at.
Okay, well, we will be following up again, seeking answers to our questions. Thank you, Jerry, for coming and testifying.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on anything other than an agenda item today? Oh, and if you're online, please raise your virtual hand. Oh, Counselor Chenoweth.
No, I was late getting here. I don't know if it's too late to talk about what you were just talking.
Nope, it is not. Welcome.
Welcome, Counselor.
Thank you. Do I need to give my name for the record?
Yes.
Chris Chenoweth, address is 977 Southwest Dove Court, McMinnville, Oregon. First, I'd like to say thank you to you three for the work that you do. Thank you, Mary, for trying to be a collaborative force with YCAP, being the voice for the county commissioners on YCAP's board, to allow good communication to happen between the two. When it became known of what had happened, I was very surprised. I feel like this is a wrong direction, obviously, to have been taken. I'm also curious how a organization that is in violation of their charter can continue to function. So I'm curious how that does play going forward. And I think you guys seeking an answer as to what they're going to do about that position is crucial. But I'd like to push further. I'd like to ask you, if I may, and I understand that the county has finite resources, but I think it's time that when we have a relationship with an organization that we're giving money to, that we audit that organization, all the organizations, not just YCAP, to ascertain if the money that we're spending as citizens that we're giving to that organization is being spent wisely, if it's really going where it's intended to go. I have grave concerns that we're building up a hierarchy of homeless advocacy that's doing nothing more than enriching the groups that we're giving the money to and not actually helping the people they're intended to help. And I'm not sure where the accountability lies. I don't see any accountability. But for the people that are giving them the money to actually take the step of holding them accountable, what is there? So I come before you to say, thank you. You guys are doing a great job. This is not criticism. This is not in any way should not be heard as criticism, but it's to ask that maybe it's time, and I'll be asking the same questions. Maybe it's time for an audit to be done by those that are giving money to the organization to make sure their money is being spent wisely. Thank you.
Thank you. We did discuss that possibility, and I think that we're limited on auditing whatever we fund. It's pretty narrow in scope, but that doesn't mean that, if they're receiving state or federal money, that isn't also an option.
Well, it's a good start, because if one organization starts to do it, that might start the ball rolling of other organizations auditing the portions that they're giving. And seeing that, what I hear when I talk to citizens routinely is they want to know where their money's going. They want an understanding. They think there's a lot of wasted dollars occurring in government. And so one way to assuage that fear is to make sure that we do our part to see where that money's going and that it's being spent wisely. And I don't understand what that means altogether at this point. I'm looking into it from the city side. I'm only one vote of 6 instead of one vote of 3, but I'm going to see what pressure I can exert that direction so that we can audit the money that we've sent, because I think it's time we get an answer.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Okay, any other public comment? All right, hearing none, we will move forward. And it looks like we are on item E, department updates. There's nothing today. Item F is our work session, and we have review and discussion of the work session calendar or schedule. Commissioners, did you receive the handout?
Yes.
The other one? Okay. And did you want to kick us off on the discussion here?
Yeah, so we have a handout that you have before you. It's a draft that Carolina put together. We have a tentative schedule for department head updates, and so it just outlines, of course, from February 8th forward is the dates that we're looking at, and kind of intending, I'm not sure how the board wants to proceed with this, but commissioners have specific topics or items that you'd like to bring forward and put on the schedule. Here's the dates that are available. We don't really have any work sessions scheduled. The one week that I would probably steer away from work sessions is on May 2nd, because that'll be budget week. We'll have budget committee that whole week, and
May 2nd?
May 2nd,
Okay.
it's going to be that that week will be budget meetings.
Okay. Do we have a list of what was submitted by commissioners for ideas?
Well, a couple commissioners submitted me a list, of individual items.
Meaning two.
Meaning two?
Two of
Commissioner
three.
Johnston?
Mine were verbal
It's
right,
not,
last meeting.
doesn't.
And
count.
honestly, I didn't compile that, the list, and I thought it would be better for the commissioners to kind of bring your ideas here, because I didn't want to circulate a list and, have a serial meeting, So in an abundance of caution, that's why I figured it'd be better to schedule this as a work session. And hopefully commissioners, you can just kind of throw out some of your ideas and reach consensus on this is a topic you want to schedule for a work session and then pick a date, and I'm ready to take notes.
Okay. Why don't we start by, can you recall all the ideas that you had? Why don't we
Mine was
start by-
all budget oriented, and I've been working on this since like last October, so whenever we can fit it in, the sooner the better before we start getting into budget season stuff, and biggest concern being the sheriff's department, so we can, because that's gonna be probably the biggest hurdle out of all of them, I think. So,
What specifically on concerning the sheriff's budget?
well,
wanna break
last
'em
year,
up?
what's that?
You want to break it up into different work sessions, or is it just kind of an all?
No, I think all inclusive, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and more of, have them bring to us any concerns so that we're not surprised like we were last year when we got down to the wire and then everything blows up in the newspaper and we have issues.
Okay.
I just want to stay a little bit more on top of it this year.
Okay. Is that the only
That's all I
one?
got.
Okay.
So if I understand correctly, it would be a discussion on the sheriff's office budget prior to budget committee, or any challenges or anything that comes up.
Just the sooner the better before we start getting into budget season.
Okay. Because what I'd probably recommend for that, if you're considering a time or scheduling that, I would probably aim for, I don't know, I'm looking at the sheriff, I know he's here, maybe end or middle of March, because I know budget committee is scheduled for, like I said, end of May, first week, or end of April, first week of May.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure if we're going to talk about budget numbers, that I actually have budget numbers without necessarily kind of overburdening the sheriff's office and my office and trying to compile a bunch of.
So if we did like
numbers.
March, well, 7th is planning. So if we did like March 14th or February 29th, is that far enough along to where you'll have a pretty good idea?
I would probably, the later in March,
Okay.
the closer to April we get, the better. Just because we're going to be actively working on budgets, and with a new sheriff looking at the budget, and we're still in the process of building the version 10 budget right now. So we wouldn't have, I'm hoping that at the end of kind of building that version 10 budget, that we'll have a better idea of where the concerns are, shortfalls, issues, priorities, some of those things. We'll have some of that baseline data for FY25. If that makes sense. So
It does. You're getting super technical. I'm probably more high level of,
Right.
is there issues that we need to be aware of?
right. And
And-
I'm saying that until we start actually building version 10,
You won't know.
we won't know, because again, I rely on the departments to take the first dive into their budgets. And so if it's a revenue issue, if it's a personnel cost, if it's FTEs, if it's facilities, if it's operational costs, be able to narrow down or identify those specific areas. I'm sure the sheriff and his command team can probably list off a few things right out of the gate. But if the board is going to want to get deeper dive in this type of discussion and understand cost implications for both the current year and for next year, and where there may be needs, that I think the more time is needed for us to do that initial budget work that we're currently working on right now.
Should we do two versions? One is high level. These are possible issues that could arise as we get closer, and then a second one that is the more in-depth, like. So looks like the 22nd of February is open. Have some initial discussion, very high level discussion, and then get closer to like maybe April 25th would then be the more in-depth. I'd hate to
I
take
also
up 2
have
days.
dog
Yeah, not
control.
allowed to have 2 days.
Well, we're gonna have the sheriff here every week because we've got dog control discussion and long-term capital investment for the jail. So there's quite a few issues.
I don't think I'd be ready by February 22nd
Okay.
or that early, just knowing what we're going through right now
Okay.
with billing budgets. I'd probably realistically March 7th or March 14th, subject to change but I think either one of those 2 dates, we should have version 10 entered. We should have a pretty good idea of what we're looking at. Including the current fiscal year and for next fiscal year. That'll give us enough time to have data. So that way, I want to make sure that I'm able to answer questions that are raised. And without having, because it's kind of twofold. It's looking at the current fiscal year and it's looking at next fiscal year for that specific department. And then we could put one date on the calendar. And then if there's insufficient time, the board could always at that point, hey, let's come back and talk about this. It's not unusual for us to get kind of marching orders we needed some more feedback, some more information, can we come back in 2 weeks and continue the work session?
So let's shoot for March 14th for that. And then a tentative pencil in for April 11th.
Okay.
Or know that I guess that day could be the second more in-depth day.
Okay, say that again.
So 14th for initial and then detailed on April 11th.
Okay. Dog control is on my list. We are fairly limited on what we can do currently. So that discussion is really intended to be more about what are ideas for what else can we do? What other options do we have? So nothing is likely going to change before this next budget is decided. So it's not necessarily something that has to happen before the first week of May, but I want to make sure it's on our radar. Thoughts on that, Ken, in terms of dog control discussion?
No, I think that one has been an ongoing discussion for
Okay.
length of time.
Are we separating this out? So when I say sheriffs, I'm thinking Marine Patrol, dog, everything that we had issues with last year. Are you
Yeah,
guys thinking
we
about
can talk
separate
about
issues
it.
because they're going to be longer?
I'm
or-
talking about a long-term plan for dog control.
So you think that'll be a meeting of its own then?
I would
Yeah.
recommend we've always had in the past, any discussions on dog control as a separate.
Okay.
I think with the sheriff's office
And I'm okay with that. I
Yeah.
just, in my head, want to keep it separate.
there's a lot of elements to it as far as the ordinance, how the programs run, the contracts, the budget, all the above. So,
The one thing that I have is the good governance discussion in terms of how commissioners are going to report discretionary expenditures, travel, reimbursements, all that. So that one I definitely want to have happen before fairly soon so that we can work that into the budget presentation for this year. And it's not I'm not thinking anything super complicated. It's just,
Mhm.
you know, the basics. But we need to agree on what we're gonna report.
For
So,
that, I would probably recommend, maybe put together ideas and maybe that takes the form of a policy that the board wants to adopt.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay.
Um,
so maybe the end of February, we have that initial discussion as to what we want to see included in the policy. And then we can put it together. Okay, so let's shoot for February 29th for that. Long-term capital investment needs for the jail. Again, I don't think anything is going to significantly shift by the first week of May, so that's not necessarily a critical item unless unless there is critical items, and then we can look at that discussion on the 14th with your overall sheriff overview. And then county communication strategy. I would prefer that we have that one, towards the end of March, maybe early April, maybe March 28th. Because that might encompass some budget discussions in terms of how we sort of rearrange things in the budget. So let's shoot for March 28th for communication strategy. Commissioner Stewart, did you have items on your list that take precedent before the first week of May?
I have a couple of things, yeah, because I would like to see something that might, again, have to be discussed in relation to budget. One of the things that I've found is probably critical, and I'd rather see it addressed sooner than later, is anybody who knows our administrator knows he's the first one here and the last one to leave. And this has been going on for several years. When you're talking about 12-hour days, 6 days a week, sorry, I'm going to talk about you with you here. And I don't think it's sustainable to ask anybody to take on what I've watched the job for being here almost 10 years. I've watched the job of administrator really morph into something which would be better addressed with having a half a person or another person to pick up some of the load. We have things that are going on now that we never had before. So the job of the administrator has now become the catch-all as the chief budget officer, dealing with union issues, negotiations, HR issues, grievances, plus administrating every single department in this county and dealing with employee issues. That to me, in other counties, even smaller counties, there is a division of that labor. And we are asking one person to do that. Our administrator is a Marine and doesn't say, no, I'm not going to do it. He finds a way to do it. But I don't think that that is in the best interest of asking anyone to do that for any length of time and not have it impact not only their health, but the health of the organization. Because you can't be all things to all people. And so I've been for years been haranguing our administrator saying, we really need to take some of this off your plate. What to me that looks like is a deputy administrator. A deputy administrator who, if our administrator were to decide he just doesn't want to do this anymore, or he got sick, or was on vacation, that we have somebody who knows exactly what's going on in all the different departments and is up to speed, basically a co-pilot. so that our administrator can delegate, that if he has to leave the controls and go out to the restroom, there's someone who can fly the plane. I think that our administrator also has a hard time delegating, which means that he does it himself. And that is, I think, going to take a toll. In the interest of the organization's health, better communications, better relationships with our department heads and with the Board of Commissioners. I always tell them I feel like a latchkey kid. You know, when we are unable to address things we'd like to be working on, we can't do it because our parent's not home. Well, our parent is home, but he's in his office addressing urgent, critical. If it's not one thing, it is another critical issue. And I think we need to take some of that off his plate. And I also think it also informs a continuity of operations. So we've got a pilot and a co-pilot. So to me, my primary interest is, and I think we talked about this and maybe getting a job description, and then the strike happened and that whole thing got put. But every time we try to get movement on this, there's another crisis. And we have had one crisis after another. And our administrator has been the point man on that. So I would like to see a deputy, a job description for a deputy, and something that we can really get posted, I'd say sooner rather than later. And the other part of my wish list has to do with another deputy, and that's across the street in the sheriff's office. And that would be to, if we can find a way in our budget, even if we have to rob Peter to pay Paul in our other departments, to basically fund another deputy. And I know I'm overstepping my bounds because the sheriff is here, but to me, the most important thing is that we are running our administration so that we have plugged all the leaks. And the other thing is that our public safety has to be job number one. The county does an awful lot of stuff, but I think the most important thing it does is to make sure that the men and women who are out there risking their lives in what is becoming an impossibly dangerous situation in more and more cities, we're not going to be immune from that we give them everything they need, and that is to fully staff them, even if it means we have to sacrifice elsewhere to support another deputy there. So that's just my initial. And then obviously dog control and public information. When the only communications and the only information that our citizens have is in the 2 newspapers of record, I think it's asking them to believe things that have been filtered through a very pointed agenda. When we look at the newspaper in McMinnville and the one in Newburgh, they're not getting what's happening. They're getting a one-sided biased agenda report. I would like very much to see that the county has some communication that people can sign up for email alerts, or we can get something on our website. So when we have an issue, we don't have to scramble around to do a press release. We have somebody who knows what's going on in every department and can get out a press release. So in my mind, just initially, it looks like a part-time administrator who can also be our PIO who can get press releases out. So that's just my initial throwing that out. I'm done.
Well, I don't think the sheriff would turn down another deputy, so I think we're probably safe in that suggestion.
And our brand new website has a tab for news updates.
I noticed that.
I know, I saw that. I was looking at that this morning.
Side note,
Very
Need
nice.
the login for it.
that's very exciting. The website looks great.
Yeah, it
And
does look good.
I was trolling through it and having fun yesterday, so yeah, it looks great.
I'm more than happy to come back and if we want to schedule a work session and kind of share. And I'm thinking for